democratic backsliding and highlighted the role of civil society, it is for the people of Georgia to decide on their own future. In Central Asia, we shared best practices and experiences from close Nordic cooperation. The trilateral border agreement between Kyrgyz Republic, Tajikistan and Uzbekistan is a testament to what good regional cooperation can achieve. In Southeastern Europe, we supported Bosnia and Herzegovina's constitutional order, emphasized social dialogue in Serbia, and backed efforts to resolve Kosovo's political and institutional crisis. Moreover, and importantly, we also looked beyond our own region and strengthened ties with the OSCE partners for cooperation, recognizing that Euro-Atlantic stability is interconnected with security and stability in other regions, such as the Indo-Pacific region. Madam President, there is no need to reinvent the European security order. Instead, there is a need to abide by the OSCE principles we have already agreed to and respect international law and the UN Charter. There is also a need to utilize the OSCE fully for what it was created for. The OSCE has great potential. Its comprehensive approach, autonomous institutions, and 12 field operations prevent conflicts and work to make the collective commitments of the 57 participating states a reality. At the same time, during our chairpersonship, Finland has introduced an agenda of reform on the future of the OSCE. The Helsinki Plus 50 discussions have generated broad support, reinforced ownership among participating states, and produced concrete reform proposals, some already under implementation. Like the UN, the OSCE needs efficiency, flexibility, and the ability to deliver. To this end, the new Helsinki Plus 50 fund seeks to strengthen the operational capacity of the OSCE. Madam President, multilateral cooperation based on international law can and must be the bedrock for international peace and security. This is also what countries and peoples around the world expect. Effective multilateralism requires a capable and relevant UN, as well as effective and relevant regional organizations. While this Council bears primary responsibility for international peace and security, regional efforts can amplify its impact. Indeed, the UN Charter itself encourages the settlement of local disputes through regional organizations before referring them to this Council. As chair of the OSCE, Finland has advanced UN-OSCE cooperation under Chapter 8 of the UN Charter. The UN-OSCE partnership is essential for peace and stability in the Euro-Atlantic region and beyond. The UN, the OSCE, and their staff continue to cooperate for common goals in various contexts. And being here in New York, I want to commend the UN and its staff for their important contribution. Madam President, to conclude, I would like to end where I began and return to the UN Charter and the Helsinki Principles. The world has changed a lot in the past decades, and let us not forget, most of the change has been for the better. The number of countries rated free has nearly doubled since 1975, when the Helsinki Final Act was signed. In the OSCE, the absolute number of independent, democratic, free societies has increased by around 15 to over 40. Across the world, people live longer, are healthier, and better educated. They are freer than ever to shape their own future. This is the enduring spirit of the Helsinki Final Act, a spirit that is alive in the hands, hearts, and minds of those who dare to believe that freedom is a right for everyone, not the privilege for the few. The power to tear down walls lies with the people. It always has, and it always will. I thank you.
I thank Her Excellency Ms. Valtonen for her briefing, and I shall now make a statement in my capacity as the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Foreign and European Affairs of Slovenia. I would like to thank Minister Valtonen for her comprehensive briefing and to commend her and Finland for the excellent work done since assuming the OSCE chairpersonship, which culminated in the success of the Ministerial Council meeting in Vienna last week. OSCE has always had a special place in our hearts, as it was the first international organization that Slovenia joined as an independent country. The OSCE's work is carried out alongside and in close cooperation with the United Nations. The two organizations share the same fundamental principles and commitments. OSCE continues to deliver important outcomes for European security. Its valuable and extensive confidence and security building measures, as well as its autonomous institutions and field missions, contribute to reducing risks, promoting transparency, and building confidence. For decades, OSCE, the largest regional arrangement under Chapter 8 of the UN Charter, embodied a comprehensive approach to security, an approach which acknowledges that peace is more than the absence of war, an approach which recognizes that true peace requires respect for human rights, democratic governance, media freedom, economic cooperation, and environmental responsibility. This unique method of fostering peace places the organization and its participating states in a remarkable position to address contemporary security challenges. The organization can address the accelerating threats to democratic institutions, such as disinformation campaigns and hybrid actions. In addition, OSCE is capable of addressing climate change and related risks, which are increasingly becoming a threat multiplier. In this connection, I would like to commend Finland for placing the broader triple planetary crisis of climate change, pollution, and biodiversity loss high on the OSCE agenda. Slovenia is honored to have contributed to these discussions as the chair of the OSCE's Economic and Environmental Committee this year. Minister Valtonen, your chairpersonship came at a particularly symbolic moment, coinciding with the 50th anniversary of the Helsinki Final Act, a cornerstone of European security and a foundation to OSCE's identity. I was honored to participate at its commemoration conference this summer in Helsinki. However, we marked this historic moment at a time of profound crisis. Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine constitutes a flagrant violation of the UN Charter and the Helsinki Final Act. It has shaken the very foundation of European security. Slovenia supports Finland's prioritization of Ukraine. We consider it paramount to continue to uphold the principles and commitments of the organization and to monitor closely the war on Ukraine. And in this connection, Slovenia welcomes OSCE's efforts in ensuring full accountability for gross violations of international law, including international humanitarian and humanitarian rights law. However, despite very real constraints, the OSCE remains an indispensable instrument of maintenance of international peace and security. Even in moments of unprecedented political tension, the OSCE is an essential channel for dialogue. The unique organization and its achievements need to be preserved. Europe's security and prosperity demand it. And in conclusion, I wish to express Slovenia's full support to Switzerland as the future chairpersonship in office in upholding the effectiveness, resilience, and functionality of this truly remarkable organization. I resume my function as President of the Council, and I now give the floor to the representative of United Kingdom.
Thank you, Your Excellency, for coming to preside over this important meeting. Let me welcome you back to New York, to the Council, and congratulate you on Slovenia's assumption of the presidency for the month of December. You have our full support. And thank you, Minister Valtonen, for your briefing and for Finland's leadership as OSCE Chair in Office this past year. The UK remains a strong supporter of OSCE cooperation with the UN. This year marked 50 years since the signing of the Helsinki Final Act. It enshrined a set of principles on how states should treat each other and their citizens. The anniversary event in Helsinki should have been celebrated amongst decades of peace and stability that these principles helped secure. Instead, it took place amid the biggest war in Europe since the 1940s, Russia's illegal war of aggression against Ukraine. As we said at the OSCE Ministerial Council last week, Russia has trampled on the Helsinki Final Act and violated every OSCE commitment. Through the OSCE and other multilateral fora, we must maintain relentless scrutiny of Russia's unjustifiable war and hold it accountable. Thanks to the efforts of President Trump and Ukraine's constructive engagement, there has been progress towards ending this war. But the journey will be difficult as long as President Putin shows no sign of negotiating in good faith. The UK remains committed to supporting Ukraine's pursuit of a just and lasting peace, which safeguards its sovereignty, security, and territorial integrity. Should it be called upon, the OSCE has the tools and experience to help Ukraine recover and rebuild, from monitoring ceasefires to decommissioning weapons and supporting veterans' reintegration. Meanwhile, Russia seeks to weaken Western resolve, a misguided endeavour. Russian proxies have conducted malicious acts of sabotage across Europe, while an industrial scale of information manipulation is designed to destabilise societies. Bilaterally, we are taking robust action to counter these threats. Last Thursday, the UK government sanctioned the GRU in its entirety and individuals behind state-sponsored hostile acts across Europe, including on UK soil. This was in response to the publication of the Dawn Sturgis inquiry in the UK. That report confirmed that Russia's reckless use of a military-grade nerve agent on UK soil in 2018 led to the tragic death of a British citizen. These threats are wide-ranging, so for our response to be effective, it must be collective. This makes multilateral organisations like the OSCE vital. The OSCE's principles of cooperation should also help us tackle another growing issue, irregular migration and the illicit finance that fuels it, a top UK priority. The OSCE could do more to support states strengthen border security. Colleagues, the principles agreed in Helsinki, alongside the UN Charter, continue to be the foundation of true security in Europe. The United Kingdom remains steadfast in our support for the OSCE. I thank you.
I thank the representative of United Kingdom, and I now give the floor to the representative of United States.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you, Madam Minister, for your participation today. We appreciate Finland's principal leadership of the OSCE this year, the 50th anniversary of the Helsinki Final Act. You and your teams in Vienna and Helsinki have worked hard to begin positioning the OSCE to better respond to current and future challenges. At this time, as the bloodiest war in recent history rages in Europe, organizations that support peace are important. Ending the Russia-Ukraine war is a top priority for President Trump, and it is time to build sustainable peace through negotiation. The killing must stop. We appreciate and welcome the OSCE's readiness to play a supporting role in this process. As President Trump made clear in his speech at the UN General Assembly, international organizations need to return to their core mandates, cut bloat, and modernize. This includes the OSCE. Madam Minister, we commend the steps taken during your chairmanship to develop a reform agenda, including in discussions at the ministerial meeting you hosted in Vienna. The OSCE must return to its core mission of promoting peace, preventing wars, and increasing prosperity. Narrowing focus and scope logically means tighter resourcing. Fiscal reform and right-sizing of OSCE institutions and missions are important to maximizing effectiveness. We believe OSCE reform is necessary to ensure the organization can fulfill its mission of advancing security in Europe and provide a venue where states with divergent visions of society can effectively meet, negotiate, and manage their differences. We want to ensure that the OSCE of 2026 and beyond serves as a platform that enables participating states to work on pressing security issues. This includes conventional arms control and border security, and to counter threats like terrorism, money laundering, and trafficking. We need an OSCE that is ready to help secure peace once President Trump succeeds in ending the war between Russia and Ukraine. By continuing the long-standing collaboration between the OSCE and the UN, we can leverage our collective strength to address complex global challenges more effectively. Thank you.
I thank the representative of United States, and I now give the floor to the representative of Algeria.
Thank you, Excellency, Madam President, for presiding over this meeting. I would also like to welcome Her Excellency, Minister Elena Valtonen, at this meeting, and to thank her for her insightful briefing as chairperson in office of the Organization of Security and Cooperation in Europe. Madam President, this year marks the 50th anniversary of the Helsinki Final Act that set the ground for the OSCE as a multilateral framework for dialogue and negotiation on security issues in Europe. On this occasion, Algeria, as a Mediterranean partner for cooperation that actively participated in the negotiations of the 1975 Helsinki Final Act, reaffirms the importance of promoting multilateralism and strengthening cooperation between the UN Security Council and the OSCE. In the same spirit, Algeria presents, every year, the UNGA resolution entitled Strengthening of Security and Cooperation in the Mediterranean Region. Madam President, the current context, shaped by increasing conflicts and crisis and escalation of tensions, including the ongoing conflict around Ukraine and the recurrent tensions in Western Balkans, has generated numerous security, economic, and social consequences for the region and beyond. In this regard, we believe that these security challenges require doubling our efforts to uphold regional cooperation as a cornerstone for maintaining international peace and security. Against this backdrop, I would like to highlight the following points. First, it remains important to renew the collective engagement within the OSCE and to reinforce its essential role in promoting regional security and stability. Equally important is the need to effectively overcome the divisions and challenges that impede the work of the organization. Second, Algeria highlights the importance of dialogue and negotiation in fostering mutual understanding and developing common ground for addressing shared security concerns, particularly in conflict prevention and resolution. Third, it is crucial to uphold the rules of procedure and established practices of the OSCE, reinforcing its comprehensive and cooperative approach to addressing security challenges. This is vital to maintaining credibility, fostering transparency, and ensuring the organization's effective functioning. Finally, Algeria looks forward to an impactful role for the OSCE in advancing peace and security among participating states, while upholding its core mandates rooted in the principles of the Helsinki Final Act. Turning challenge into opportunity is now, more than ever, essential to enhancing cooperation and preserving unity for the future of the organization. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Algeria for the statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Russian Federation.
Thank you, Madam President. We didn't have any high expectations regarding today's intervention from the chairperson in office, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Finland, Ms. Elina Valtonen. After all, the Finnish chairmanship throughout this year has systematically and consistently exacerbated the crisis in our organization, driving to absurdity the total Ukrainization of the OSCE's agenda. As a result, the OSCE does not play any kind of significant role, not even in those areas where it has the mandate and potential to do so. Spheres of genuine cooperation have been reduced to very narrow secondary issues. Meanwhile, the elephant in the room, that is the European security crisis provoked by NATO countries, is something that the CIO is trying not to notice. The only thing it is doing is groundlessly and despite the facts, pinning responsibility for the consequences of these steps on Russia. So should we really be surprised that our pan-European organization, which 50 years ago laid the groundwork for peaceful coexistence and cooperation in Europe, should we be surprised that no one even remembers it today? If you, Madam Minister, set yourself this as your objective a year ago, well, then we can congratulate you on successfully implementing this objective. Moreover, unfortunately, we've gotten used to the fact that interventions in this chamber of CIOs over the last few years are conducted in violation of their mandate, which is clearly circumscribed, in particular in decisions adopted by the Ministerial Council of the OSCE in Porto in 2002. And let me quote, "The CIO should ensure that its actions are not inconsistent with positions agreed by all participating states and that the whole spectrum of opinions of participating states is taken into account." End of quote. As you've just aptly demonstrated, our Finnish colleagues aren't striving to do anything of the sort. On behalf of the OSCE, they are promoting a strictly Western, flawed, anti-Russian narrative. I'd like to remind you, Ms. Valtonen, that the CIO does not have the right to change the parameters of the organization's functioning to serve their national ambitions, nor the wishes of specific groups of countries. After all, currently in the OSCE, there is no shared understanding of the reasons and prospects of the settlement of the crisis in Ukraine. It follows that speaking about this on behalf of the OSCE is something you have no right to do. You have just a few more weeks left at the helm of the organization, yet you haven't grasped the basic principles of how the organization functions, nor have your colleagues. You've showed that to us today. The main principle is, of course, the principle of consensus, which is the cornerstone of all of the OSCE's work. During the Finnish leadership, what was promoted actively was the tactic of segmenting discussions into small groups. The objective here is plain as day, excluding countries that aren't to your liking, first and foremost Russia, from these discussions and laying the groundwork for a departure from this key OSCE principle, consensus. All of this was done throughout 2005 under the heading of dubious reforms within the so-called Helsinki Plus 50 process. If the organization continues down this course, well, soon we'll probably have to talk about it in the past tense. Madam President, now, I won't spend any time repudiating the anti-Russian insinuations in the context of Ukraine, which we heard today. It's clear as day where things stand on the Ukrainian settlement process. The corrupt Ukrainian princeling, who continues to violate basic human rights and freedoms in Ukraine, is aiming to cling on to power and everything he's stolen over these last few years from his people at any cost, even if it means turning his entire populace into cannon fodder to be used up on the front lines. Meanwhile, his European accomplices, who are trying to do everything to avoid an inglorious collapse of their anti-Russia project, are busy torpedoing the peace efforts of the US and the Russian leadership, undermining the infamous spirit of Anchorage. History will judge them for this mercilessly. Instead, I'd like to address the incoming CIO Switzerland, which will be taking the OSCE wheel at a decisive moment for the organization. Colleagues, to a large extent, the organization's future depends on you, as does the OSCE's relevance within the framework of the process of trying to figure out a European security formula that's agreeable to all, a process which might begin very soon. You'd think who but the OSCE, given its mandate, its long-standing experience and pan-European nature, who else can play this key role? Yet the OSCE's ability to play this role remains to be proven, given that it has discredited itself, demonstrating its uselessness thanks to the efforts of the Finnish chairmanship and the chairmanships of a number of its predecessors. In order to bring the organization back to life, we'll have our work cut out for us. We'll need to cast aside stereotypes and nefarious practices which are hanging over the organization right now like the sword of Damocles. The OSCE must no longer be used as an instrument for promoting Western interests east of Vienna. As I said earlier, what must also end is the artificial total Ukrainization of the OSCE's agenda, which has pushed the organization to the sidelines of international affairs. Madam President, dialogue and a serious, frank discussion at the OSCE is not only possible, but it's also very necessary, not only in Europe, but the world over. Only absolutely irresponsible politicians would be uninterested in reducing the level of military and political confrontation and in seeking to overcome the divide we see in Europe. They're the ones who, despite pan-European interests, are today without reason portraying Russia as the enemy and trying to make a future war with Russia a core objective for all Europeans. This is madness. This is an attempt to brainwash the European populace. But there are some sensible forces on our continent who are trying to counter these efforts with dialogue. We were and remain open to such dialogue. The prerequisite for its success is our ability to revert to the fundamental principle of indivisible security, which implies the equal rights of each participating state to security, as well as a refusal to strengthen one's own security at the expense of the security of others. As per this cornerstone, this paradigm, not a single group of states can claim to bear primary responsibility for maintaining peace and security in the OSCE region, nor can it view any part of that OSCE region as its own sphere of influence. Western states have been holding this principle in contempt, and as a result, what's fallen by the wayside are such important documents as the European Security Charter, dated 1999, and the Astana Declaration, dated 2010. Documents which enshrine that very principle. Today, it's plain as day that the current confrontation surrounding Ukraine could have been avoided if only all states which signed up to the aforementioned agreements had meticulously implemented them. Instead, the West opted for expansion of NATO and violated their undertakings within the OSCE. Madam President, it's no exaggeration to say that the OSCE stands on the edge of the precipice. Work across all of its security dimensions, the military and political, the economic, environmental, and the humanitarian one, is basically paralyzed. We've almost lost its singular military and political toolkit, the OSCE's toolkit. Traditional activities aimed at combating global transnational threats are not being conducted. Consensus-based conferences have been replaced with ersatz events. The highly politicized humanitarian basket has been infiltrated with neoliberal narratives. Against this backdrop, the Russian Federation, as a participating state of the OSCE, has every reason to expect that Switzerland will be as equidistant as possible, acting solely on behalf of all 57 participating states. We are counting on the future chairmanship to facilitate dialogue and cooperation between participating states, as well as to resolve any differences between these participating states. To this end, it's important to safeguard consensus as the basic principle for the OSCE's work, because if we don't have consensus, we won't have an organization. We expect that Bern, if Bern is genuinely set on saving this pan-European organization, which is supposed to promote cooperation and resolve any problems on this path, we believe that backbone is up to the task of at last opting in the coming year for unifying cooperation at the OSCE, casting aside any negative assets on the side of the ledger. In this scenario is something we're very interested in, whereas our European colleagues, can they cast aside Russophobia and, in the name of a peaceful future, do away with any anti-Russian narratives? We have serious doubts about that. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Russian Federation for the statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Panama.
Muchas gracias, Presidenta.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I'm very happy to see you here as Minister for Foreign Affairs. We also would like to welcome Madam Elina Valtonen, Chairperson in Office of the OSCE, and also Minister for Foreign Affairs of Finland. Panama very much welcomes these fora for cooperation between the United Nations and regional and sub-regional organizations in accordance with Chapter 8 of the Charter of the United Nations. These ties make it possible to build trust and foster collective responsibility for the maintenance of international peace and security. In this context, 50 years after the Helsinki Accords, we share the principles that guide the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe: the promotion of peace and security, respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity, the peaceful settlement of disputes, the protection of human rights, and the rule of law. This reflects our vision of an international order that is respectful of international law and that is committed to dialogue and to multilateralism, principles which Panama shares. Panama would like to also take this opportunity to commend the progress of the Helsinki Plus 50 process, particularly within the framework of the 32nd ministerial meeting, and we recognize Finland's leadership in promoting an inclusive, results-oriented dialogue. We especially value the efforts aimed at advancing institutional modernization. This strengthens efficiency and guarantees timely budgetary processes and enables reforms capable of responding more effectively to current challenges. Today's geopolitical landscape demonstrates clearly that no conflict remains isolated. Irrespective of the distance from where they occur, conflicts can disrupt the international balance. In recent years, we have witnessed how the use of force at the expense of a state's sovereignty and territorial integrity undermines regional stability and, in turn, contravenes the fundamental principles enshrined in the Charter of the United Nations. This is why the work of the OSCE is more important than ever.
And in this regard, Panama values the work of the OSCE in promoting gender equality and in prioritizing women's rights. We appreciate the initiatives undertaken jointly with participating states to strengthen the leadership and participation of women mediators and peace builders, and to ensure the comprehensive protection of these women against gender-based violence, including in digital environments. A few minutes ago, we received from Slovenia the commitments for 2026 Women, Peace and Security coordinated items. In conclusion, we would like to support all regional, sub-regional organizations and other local actors, helping to ensure that the action of the United Nations can help to navigate a very difficult situation with the main goal of maintaining international peace and security. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of Panama for the statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Denmark.
Thank you, Madam President. And let me also thank the Chairperson in Office, Foreign Minister Valtonen, for a highly valuable briefing and for her dedicated and strong leadership of the OSCE this year. Madam President, 50 years ago, in the depths of the Cold War, nations from across Europe and beyond came together in common cause to adopt the Helsinki Final Act. It set a bold vision for the future of Europe, a future defined not by war, but by peaceful cooperation through shared values, common rules and norms. Since that day in 1975, the OSCE has worked tirelessly to turn this vision into a reality. 50 years later, our aspiration for a peaceful and stable Europe endures. However, today, that aspiration is under direct assault by one of OSCE's own members. Russia's illegal war in Ukraine is a violation of the very principles upon which the OSCE was built. No region will ever be truly safe if borders can be changed by brute force. The OSCE has been vital in supporting accountability efforts in Ukraine. The OSCE's Moscow mechanism has documented severe violations of human rights and international humanitarian law by Russian forces in Ukraine. This important work must continue. History has taught us that documentation of war crimes matters for accountability, and accountability matters for building just and lasting peace. The vast majority of the OSCE members are united in their support for Ukraine's sovereignty, territorial integrity, and political independence. Russia, on the other hand, continues to dismiss calls for a ceasefire and shows no willingness to peace. Instead, Russia insists on unacceptable demands while relentlessly attacking Ukrainian civilians and critical infrastructure. Madam President, it is not only in Ukraine Russia is causing instability. Hybrid activities against the European Union and its neighboring countries have increased. The endangering of Moldova's democracy is one clear example of that. Despite Russia's efforts, the people of Moldova continue to cooperate actively with the OSCE and have chosen to move resolutely towards membership of the European Union. They have our full support. Madam President, in closing, Denmark remains steadfast in our commitment to the OSCE and to its goal of promoting dialogue and cooperation in Europe. From Moldova to the Western Balkans, from Central Asia to the South Caucasus, the OSCE has been working tirelessly for the security of people in Europe and beyond. For example, by developing standard-setting mechanisms in the field of conventional arms control and election monitoring. This year's anniversary is therefore not only a moment of remembrance, but a call for renewed purpose. We still believe in a peaceful Europe. We still believe in sovereign equality and territorial integrity. And we still believe in dialogue instead of war. We urge Russia to return to those principles and to recommit to security and economic collaboration in Europe. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Denmark for the statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of China. Please.
Thank you, President. I welcome Deputy Prime Minister and Minister for Foreign Affairs of Slovenia, Her Excellency Fumes, in presiding over today's meeting. I listened attentively to the briefing by the Chairperson in Office of OSCE and Minister for Foreign Affairs of Finland, Her Excellency Valtonen. At present, the global security landscape keeps deteriorating, marked by worsening geopolitical conflicts, constant flare-ups of hotspots, markedly rising unilateralism and protectionism, and interlocking and compounding security threats, both traditional and non-traditional. In this context, it is crucial for the UN and regional organizations, including OSCE, to further strengthen cooperation, demonstrate commitment, and diligently fulfill their mandates to together bring more stability and certainty to an era that is in flux, and contribute their share to the maintenance of international peace and security. First, we should all be defenders of common security. China, for its part, has proposed the Global Security Initiative. Under the current circumstances, it is important for the international community to champion a vision of common, comprehensive, cooperative, and sustainable security, take seriously and address properly the legitimate and reasonable security concerns of one another, maintain security in both traditional and non-traditional domains in an integrated manner, stay committed to the principle of indivisible security, coordinate efforts to advance global security governance, and strive to achieve universal and common security. Second, we should all be action-oriented followers of multilateralism. Various forms of confrontation and injustice are happening in the world today, not because the purposes and principles of the UN Charter have become anachronistic, but because of the failure to safeguard and implement them effectively. The international community should practice true multilateralism, abide by the purposes and principles of the Charter, and stand resolutely behind the international system with the UN at its core, the international order underpinned by international law, and the basic norms governing international relations based on the purposes and principles of the Charter, and defend the authority of the UN and its status as the principal platform for global security governance. Third, we should all be facilitators of dialogue and cooperation in an ever-changing and turbulent world. What we need is peace, not war, trust over mistrust, unity over division, and cooperation over confrontation. The international community should support dialogue and consultations, jointly reject the Cold War mentality and block confrontation, facilitate peace talks and engage in mediation based on the needs and will of the countries concerned, and encourage parties to conflict to build trust, address disputes, and promote security all through dialogue. President, just now, many Council members have touched upon the Ukraine crisis. China's position on this issue has been consistent and crystal clear. Dialogue and negotiations are the only viable pathway to resolve the Ukraine crisis. China supports any and all efforts that are conducive to achieving peace and will continue to play, in its own way, a constructive role in the political settlement of the crisis. China supports the relevant actors in fulfilling their mandates to help shape a balanced, effective, and sustainable European security architecture. I thank you, President.
I thank the representative of China for the statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of the Republic of Korea.
Thank you, Madam President, and welcome, Your Excellency, to the Security Council. I also thank Her Excellency Elina Valtonen, Chairperson in Office of OSCE, for the compelling briefing today. Madam President, as we commemorate the 50th anniversary of the Helsinki Final Act, this milestone invites us to reflect not only on the continued relevance of its principles, but also on the need to adapt them to suit a constantly evolving security landscape. The OSCE's comprehensive approach to security, encompassing the political, military, economic, and environment and human dimensions, aligns closely with the United Nations commitment to multilateralism. These shared foundations are especially pertinent as we address today's complex regional and global challenges. The Helsinki spirit, which enabled cooperation even amid the deepest divisions of the Cold War, continues to serve as a reliable compass as we navigate today's fractured landscape. At the same time, developments in one region increasingly reverberate across others, with the security of Europe and the Indo-Pacific becoming more closely interconnected than ever before. In this broad context, the ongoing conflict in Ukraine continues to cast a large shadow over regional stability and humanitarian conditions. As hostilities persist with grave consequences for civilians and civilian infrastructure, the situation highlights the need to uphold international humanitarian law and to end the war immediately. In this connection, we recall that the OSCE was founded on core principles, including respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity, the inviolability of frontiers, and the peaceful settlement of disputes. The Republic of Korea stresses the importance of facilitating an eventual cessation of hostilities and advancing efforts toward a sustainable peace. We encourage all parties to re-engage in meaningful dialogue to prevent further suffering. Madam President, pursuant to Chapter 8 of the United Nations Charter, enhanced cooperation with regional organizations such as the OSCE is indispensable for sustaining effective multilateralism and addressing today's interconnected peace and security issues. As the world's largest regional security organization, the OSCE continues to make a meaningful contribution through its field operations and programs in the West Balkans, the Caucasus, and Central Asia, supporting conflict prevention, dialogue facilitation, and democratic resilience. These activities also demonstrate the OSCE's continued relevance. Even within existing constraints, the organization continues to evolve and provide practical platforms for dialogue, prevention, and cooperation. Its broad approach to security remains pertinent to emerging risks, hybrid challenges, disinformation, and new technologies are reshaping security in ways that affect not only military domains, but also societal resilience, shared values, and democratic institutions. These developments reinforce the necessity for the OSCE to continually adapt its holistic approach to security and strengthen collective responses to these multidimensional risks. Madam President, first part, the Republic of Korea has been actively engaged in security cooperation with the OSCE as a partner for cooperation since 1994. Building on this long-standing partnership, my government was pleased to contribute to recent inter-regional exchanges, including through the Korea-OSCE Inter-Regional Conference in May and OSCE Asian Conference this November. In this rapidly changing security environment, the Republic of Korea reaffirms its strong commitment to strengthening cooperation between the United Nations and the OSCE and to advancing our shared goal of durable peace, stability, and effective multilateralism across regions. Moreover, the OSCE's accumulated experiences in dialogue, conflict prevention, confidence building offers meaningful insights for Northeast Asia. The Republic of Korea views the Helsinki spirit and the OSCE's practices as valuable reference for promoting peace and stability on the Korean Peninsula and in the wider region. These lessons will continue to inform Korea's efforts to work with the international community in advancing peace. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Republic of Korea for the statement. And I now give the floor to the representative of France.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to thank Minister Elina Valtonen, Chairperson in Office of the OSCE, for her statement. Madam President, this year marks the 50th anniversary of the Helsinki Final Act and the 35th anniversary of the Paris Charter for a New Europe. The adoption of these founding documents enshrined our collective commitment to peace and security in Europe based on shared principles. Today, these principles are being trodden underfoot by Russia. For nearly 4 years, it has been pursuing its war of aggression against Ukraine, threatening the stability of the entire continent in blatant violation of international law, the Charter of the United Nations, and its commitments under the Helsinki Final Act. As the very essence of the OSCE is under attack, France reiterates its support, our full support for the organization. The OSCE plays a central role in the security of the European continent. Its institutions and instruments within the human dimension of the OSCE are essential for documenting the crimes committed by Russia in Ukraine. The Moscow mechanism, triggered 6 times since 2022, has made it possible to shed light on Russia's massive violations of human rights and international humanitarian law, including the deportation of Ukrainian children to Russia and the ill treatment inflicted on Ukrainian prisoners of war. The OSCE must be able to carry out its mandate in the service of conflict prevention and resolution in Europe without fear of reprisals. France reiterates its call for the immediate release of all prisoners of war and civilians arbitrarily detained by Russia, including the 3 OSCE staff members held illegally. France reaffirms its unwavering support for the sovereignty, independence and territorial integrity of Ukraine and reiterates its commitment to a just and lasting peace in accordance with international law. Madam President, the OSCE plays a key role in the security of the European continent, notably through its field missions. In the Western Balkans, in Central Asia, and in Moldova, its activities directly benefit local populations by strengthening institutional capacities at the local level and promoting the rule of law. In Ukraine, despite Russia's obstruction of the field mission's activities, the OSCE has succeeded in establishing a useful, concrete and nimble instrument, the OSCE Support Programme for Ukraine. Through it, the OSCE supports humanitarian demining, strengthens the ability of Ukrainian authorities to prosecute in court the crimes committed by Russia, and reinforces Ukraine's cybersecurity capabilities. These actions provide assistance to the Ukrainian population and bolster the country's resilience. In the South Caucasus, France reiterates its support for the peace process between Armenia and Azerbaijan. The OSCE has a role to play in supporting the normalization of relations between the two countries, in full respect of international law and the territorial integrity of both states. France also welcomes the OSCE's engagement with Georgia and its participation in the Geneva International Discussion, the only legitimate platform addressing the consequences of the conflict between Russia and Georgia since 2008. Madam President, cooperation between the OSCE and the United Nations under Chapter 8 of the Charter is grounded in the convergence of principles of both organizations and in their common approach, combining security, development and human rights. 50 years after the signing of the Helsinki Final Act, the founding principles of the OSCE remain fully relevant for ensuring security in Europe. It is our duty to defend them. France commends the efforts of the Finnish OSCE chairperson in office, as well as those of the Secretary-General, to maintain the proper functioning of the organization despite the many challenges it faces. Thank you.
I thank the representative of France for the statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Somalia.
Thank you, Madam President. I also want to thank, I wish to thank the Presidency of Slovenia for convening these annual briefings. I also want to welcome Her Excellency Ms. Elena Valtonen, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Finland and the Chairperson in Office of the OSCE, and thank her for her insights on the region's current priorities and challenges. Madam President, Somalia recognizes the critical role that regional and intergovernmental organizations play in maintaining stability. As highlighted by the diverse experience of the Council members, regional bodies possess a unique and deep understanding of the specific security dynamics, history, and root causes of conflict within their regions. We value the OSCE's comprehensive definition of security, an approach that rightly acknowledges that true stability is not merely a political or military, but also relies on economic development, the sustainable use of rural resources, and full respect for human rights. This holistic approach is invaluable to global peace. Madam President, strengthening cooperation between United Nations and regional and sub-regional organizations is an integral part of the Charter of United Nations and an important part of multilateralism. Somalia supports the cooperation of United Nations and the Security Council with the regional organizations, including OSCE, in accordance with the UN Charter in order to effectively tackle challenges to international peace and security. Drawing from our own perspective in Africa, we see the immense value in such partnership. Just as the collaboration between the United Nations and the African Union is vital for silencing the guns on our continent, the partnership between UN and OSCE is essential for the European security architecture. We believe that commitment to these shared goals transcends regional boundaries. We are, however, mindful that OSCE is currently operating in an environment characterized by complex political dynamics. We note the concern raised regarding the functionality of the organization and the need to reach consensus on critical institutional issues to ensure its continued effectiveness. In this regard, Somalia wishes to emphasize 3 points. First, we join other Council members in urging all parties to fully commit to diplomatic engagement as the only path to sustainable peace. Dialogue is the very essence of an effective multilateralism. Second, we commend the chairperson's in office's focus on human dimensions of security. We welcome the emphasis on women, peace and security, and youth, peace and security agendas. Ensuring the full participation of women and youth is not only a matter of rights, but a prerequisite for a lasting conflict resolution and peace building. Third, respect for established rules and impartiality is vital for the credibility of any regional organization. We encourage OSCE to continue its efforts to advocate for justice and the rule of law. Madam President, to conclude, regional leadership is essential in supporting the efforts of this Council. Somalia reiterates its support for the strengthening of the relationship between United Nations and OSCE. It is important to work together to find pathways for lasting peace in Europe and beyond, and we remain committed in that endeavor. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Somalia for the statement, and I give the floor to the representative of Greece.
Thank you, Madam President. I would like to start by thanking the Minister for Foreign Affairs of Finland, Ms. Elina Valtonen, Chairperson in Office of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, for her briefing. Since the OSCE Ministerial Conference took place only a few days ago, I would like to start by commending Finland for the OSCE chairpersonship under these challenging circumstances. The guiding principles under the motto Respect, Respond, Prepare, which were placed by the chair in office at the center of its efforts to reinvigorate OSCE's work, pave the way to structure a dialogue on the future of the organization. Greece believes in the OSCE's unique identity and role based on the Helsinki principles. Through its comparative advantages, in particular its comprehensive approach to security, its structures, its autonomous institutions, such as the Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights, ODIHR, which works across the OSCE region to strengthen security by protecting and promoting democracy and human rights, as well as its field operations, the OSCE remains well placed in the multilateral system and in the context of international efforts aiming at achieving genuine, sustainable security. Greece recognizes the important contribution of regional intergovernmental organizations for the maintenance of international peace and security in the framework of Chapter 8 of the UN Charter. As one of the original signatories of the Helsinki Final Act and an active OSCE member since 1973, Greece strongly supports the enduring partnership between the OSCE and the Security Council based on the 1993 framework of cooperation and coordination. The OSCE continues to deliver important outcomes for European security through reducing risks, promoting transparency, building confidence, and functioning as a platform for dialogue on security in the region. Allow me to focus on the role of OSCE into addressing the most important conflict in its region, namely the war of aggression of Russia against Ukraine, as well as to the results of the partnership between the OSCE and the Security Council in addressing other regional conflicts in Europe. Greece welcomes OSCE's support for Ukraine and commends Finland's chairmanship for its choice to continue prioritizing Ukraine and monitoring closely the war on its ground. Moreover, we commend an uninterrupted OSCE engagement with Ukraine through its support program for Ukraine, which was launched to address immediate challenges to civilians posed by the war and to support long-term democratic and social resilience of Ukraine's institutions and civil society. In this regard, let me echo all of those calling for the immediate release of the 3 OSCE staff members who remain illegally detained by the Russian authorities. Greece also welcomes the OSCE's role towards addressing protracted conflicts in the region. The August 8th agreements reached between Armenia and Azerbaijan in Washington, D.C., including their joint decision regarding the conclusion of the OSCE Minsk Group's mandate, represent a significant and welcome first step toward lasting peace and stability in the region. These developments demonstrate that both sides are prepared to move forward and address the legacy of conflict. As these processes advance, the OSCE remains well placed to contribute through its experience in dialogue facilitation, confidence building, and support for cooperative security. It is now essential to maintain momentum. The initial peace agreement must be signed without delay. All remaining outstanding issues must be resolved in accordance with international law, including the principles of sovereignty and territorial integrity. We support the work of OSCE field missions in Central Asia and the Western Balkans, as well as its facilitating role for a peaceful settlement of the conflicts in Moldova and Georgia. Coming to our immediate neighborhood, the Western Balkans, we commend the critical role of the OSCE mission in Kosovo under the mandate of Resolution 1244 towards the promotion of human rights and enhancing interethnic dialogue. To conclude, Madam President, in its capacity as both an OSCE member and an elected member of this Council, Greece stands ready to work further to enhance the partnership between the OSCE and the Security Council within the framework of Chapter 8 of the UN Charter. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Greece for the statement, and then I'll give the floor to the representative of Pakistan.
Thank you, Madam President. I would also like to welcome the chairperson in office of the OSCE, the Foreign Minister of Finland, Madam Elina Valtonen, to this meeting, and to thank her for her briefing. Pakistan recognizes OSCE's historic legacy and the valuable work that this organization has undertaken for the advancement of peace and security, maintenance of stability, and promotion of good neighborly relations amongst its members in the Eurasian region. Forged in the spirit of the Helsinki Final Act, the OSCE established an indispensable framework for fostering dialogue, promoting confidence building, and advancing peaceful dispute resolution in the post-war era, an era marred by an acute trust and security deficit. We note with appreciation OSCE's peace-building efforts, including in Eastern European countries, thus bringing stability to the region. OSCE's pioneering work in the field of CBMs also served as a blueprint for similar efforts undertaken by other regional organizations. Madam President, today the foundational ethos of international relations, multilateralism, cooperation, and indivisible security, as envisaged in the preamble of the Helsinki Final Act, is perhaps facing its biggest challenge in decades. The OSCE, too, is navigating a difficult geopolitical landscape, with conflict raging in the heart of Europe for nearly 4 years, depletion of trust, and unprecedented strains on peaceful coexistence. We are cognizant of the dramatic shift in realities and power dynamics that exist today. However, my delegation is of the view that it is precisely in these times that we must rekindle the spirit of Helsinki, avoid confrontation, invest more in dialogue and diplomacy, and renew our unwavering commitment to crafting mutually agreed confidence and security building measures. This is not a matter of choice, but a strategic imperative to lower tensions, rebuild essential channels of communication, and demonstrate that comprehensive security is best preserved through cooperative instruments and not by the pursuit of hegemony and domination through military means. Objective, inclusive, and impartial principles-based approaches are indispensable for success. Effective partnership also goes beyond coordination. It is about leveraging complementary strengths for conflict prevention, transnational threat response, and post-conflict stabilization, always grounded in the UN's Charter's core principles. President, our principled approach on matters related to cooperation between the UN and regional organizations is informed by the value that we believe that these organizations bring to the work of the UN, including in the maintenance of international peace and security. To that end, we support OSCE's cooperation with the UN consistent with Chapter 8 of the UN Charter. We believe that the United Nations, the regional organizations, and all UN member states must prioritize and invest more in conflict prevention and pacific settlement of disputes, as reaffirmed by the Council recently in its Resolution 2788. Madam President, the path forward demands a conscious choice. Choosing cooperation over confrontation, dialogue over division, and inclusive security over bloc-based divides. Pakistan hopes that the OSCE will continue to champion this cause and this choice, and this Council will support such a partnership that reaffirms our shared commitment to a stable and just global order underpinned by international law and an unwavering commitment to multilateralism with the UN at its core. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Pakistan for the statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Sierra Leone.
Thank you so much, Madam President. I welcome Your Excellency Tijan Fajon, Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs of Slovenia, to the Council, and thank you for convening this meeting. I also thank Her Excellency Elina Valtonen, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Finland, in her capacity as the current chairperson in office of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, for our briefing on the activities of the OSCE. This year's annual briefing from the OSCE-CIO is especially important as we celebrate the 50th anniversary of the signing of the Helsinki Final Act, which laid the foundation for the organization. More than ever, the principles of freedom, democracy, and human rights must be central in all our efforts to address the complex challenges facing the region and the world at large. At a time when security crises across the European continent have highlighted significant breaches of international law, including international humanitarian law, as well as complex cultural and ethnic differences, Sierra Leone welcomes the OSCE's effort to strengthen cooperation with the United Nations. We recognize that the Council's engagement with the OSCE is crucial in fostering dialogue and cooperation on key security challenges in the Euro-Atlantic and Eurasia regions. We commend the leadership demonstrated in this regard by Finland as the 2025 chairperson and welcome Switzerland as incoming chairperson for 2026. Sweden echoes the call from 50 years ago for the primacy of diplomacy and cooperation in securing a peaceful and prosperous Europe. We commend OSCE's effort to promote security, stability, and cooperation in the region, including its efforts to address the Russian-Ukraine conflict. We join others in stating that this conflict must end now and urge the parties to engage in good faith dialogue and mediation towards an immediate cessation of hostilities, a ceasefire, and lasting and sustainable peace. We emphasize the importance of the OSCE-UN cooperation in providing a viable space for dialogue and securing critical guarantees for sustainable and just peace. Sierra Leone also recognizes the importance of the OSCE's effort to address human rights violations and humanitarian concerns in the context of the Ukraine-Russia conflict through the OSCE Moscow mechanism, as well as in other conflict-affected areas. We support the organization's effort to promote international human rights law, accountability, and justice across Europe. Madam President, Sierra Leone takes note of the CIO's other outlined priorities, including implementing reforms for better organizational efficiency and effectiveness, and strengthening democracy through improved civic participation. We commend the leadership of Finland on the Helsinki Plus 50 discussions on the future of the OSCE, which have laid a solid foundation for organizational effectiveness and for reaffirming the principles of the 1975 Helsinki Final Act. We have no doubt that Switzerland will provide continued leadership in this regard, including consensus on a unified budget, which remains critical for achieving the organization's strategic objectives in addressing the devastating effects of armed conflict, which go beyond immediate humanitarian responses during the conflict to post-conflict reconstruction and peace-building efforts that address the drivers of the conflict. Recalling Sierra Leone's priorities on the Council, we also welcome advancement in discussions on women and youth peace and security agendas, which culminated in the OSCE-wide roadmap for the implementation of the Women, Peace and Security Commitment. Underpinned by Security Council Resolution 1325, this forward-looking strategy actively promotes gender equality and strengthens women's participation, protection, and rights across the entire conflict cycle. In closing, Madam President, Sierra Leone fully supports the OSCE's work in conflict mediation and regional cooperation, as well as its mission to uphold security and human rights. We remain committed to constructive involvement in strengthening the effort towards global peace and security. And I thank you.
I thank the representative of Sierra Leone for the statement, and I now give the floor to the representative of Guyana.
Thank you, Madam President, and welcome to the Security Council. I also welcome Her Excellency Elina Valtonen, Chairperson in office of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe and Minister for Foreign Affairs of Finland, and thank her for the informative briefing. I also commend Finland for its capable leadership as chair of the OSCE over this past year and extend best wishes to Switzerland as they prepare to assume the chairmanship of the organization in just a few weeks. As an organization that works to promote stability, peace, and democracy in Europe, the OSCE is confronting one of, if not the most challenging period since its founding. Even in this context, with the largest war on the continent since World War II, the heightened tensions affecting other states, we are confident that the OSCE will continue to make positive strides in contributing to regional security. The OSCE's broad-based comprehensive approach to security ensures it is equipped to confront these challenges and contribute to efforts to resolve conflicts and pursue lasting peace. Whether through its extra budgetary support program to address immediate security needs and long-term stability in Ukraine, the Empower Local Women Politicians program of its mission in Kosovo, or its regional workshop on building energy systems resilience, the OSCE's work on the ground is a demonstration of its understanding that security threats are multifaceted and thus require multidimensional solutions. Madam President, Europe's security challenges have multiplied in recent years. The Russia-Ukraine conflict has continued for nearly 4 years, causing incalculable suffering and upending the lives of millions of civilians. The normalization of relations between Kosovo and Serbia remains elusive, and in several other countries we have witnessed peaceful demonstrations for change being responded to with excessive force. Guyana has always been consistent in advocating for the Pacific settlement of disputes and continues to call on parties to conflicts and hostilities to lay down their arms and engage in good faith negotiations. We also call upon political leaders to abide by their obligations to respect the rule of law and uphold human rights and fundamental freedoms. We take note of the expression of readiness by several OSCE member states at the recent Ministerial Council of the organization to play a role in implementing a potential peace agreement between Ukraine and the Russian Federation, and hope that this would lead to positive outcomes for countries concerned and the region. Madam President, Guyana has always had a deep understanding and appreciation for the role that regional and sub-regional organizations like the OSCE play in addressing security challenges and enhancing stability in the countries within the regions that they operate. Our tenure on the Security Council has solidified our belief that regional leadership is essential in achieving and sustaining peace, and as such, regional and sub-regional organizations are an invaluable partner to the Security Council in the execution of its mandate. Guyana urges the OSCE to continue its cooperation with the United Nations. Even as we prepare to conclude our tenure on the Security Council at the end of the month, Guyana will remain steadfast in its dedication to upholding the core principles that foster peace and security. We will continue to advocate for democracy, emphasize the importance of respect for international law, including international humanitarian law, and champion the sovereignty and territorial integrity of all states. By adhering to these principles, each nation can play a meaningful role in securing enduring peace. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Guyana for the statement. And there are no more names inscribed on the list of speakers. The meeting is adjourned.